simple, but it is the financial aid that you might receive in law school is somewhat straightforward. So once you get to know a little bit more about it. So let's get into it. So first, I'll do a little bit of an overview of UF law so you get to know a little bit more about us. Second, I'll talk about how to finance your legal education. And then the third part, I'll take Q&A. So if you do have questions, it's okay to go ahead and put them in the chat throughout the presentation. But I think that what we'll do is probably hold it to the end. And so that way that we can answer everything all at once. Questions about UF or questions about financing your legal education. So the first thing that I want to talk about is UF Law, and we do offer an exceptional value for outstanding opportunities. So these are some of the fantastic things that I'm going to talk about that UF Law offers. First is our strong national reputation. We are the #1 law school in Florida. We're the flagship institution of this state. And our institution's academics are being recognized nationally by multiple sources. We have the #3 tax law program in the country, the #1 tax law program in the country if for public schools. And 2 out of our other 9 legal areas of study that we offer are ranked in the public top 10. So, and overall, the university is ranked the #4 public university in the country by Forbes. So that is not only in the law school would you be part of a very nationally recognized program, the university as a whole is very strong. So we have some proven career outcomes for our students as well. So it's important that you know what the outcomes of the students are of the law school that you think that you might want to attend, because that's what you're going to be facing when you graduate. So luckily at the University of Florida, well, not luckily, it's due to a lot of hard work by our administration, our faculty, and our students and our graduates, that we have the #1 bar pass rate in Florida among first-time test takers. 95.5% of our students are employed within 10 months of graduation. We have over 600 different employers participating in our on-campus interview, OCI program. That's what OCI stands for, on-campus interviews. So when employers come to campus to interview students for jobs and internships, that's OCI. So we have over 600 employers who participate in that. And then we are the #16 best law school for law firm employment. So that's law firms of any size, big law, medium law, smaller firms, all sorts of different types of law firm employment. So we also offer a number of fantastic experiential learning opportunities. An experiential learning opportunity is basically just skills-based work done outside the traditional classroom setting for credit. So there's multiple different ways that you can get experiential learning opportunities. One is via our externship program. Our externship is basically just an internship done for credit alongside a reflection course about your experience. You can find your own pre-established placement, or you can find your own qualifying placement in your area of interest on your own and then get that approved. We have 8 different clinics and 3 field placements, and those kind of go together because those are both in both of those experiences, you act as lawyers under the supervision of an attorney and handle your own cases for credit. So basically, the 8 clinics are within the law school. They range in topics from entrepreneurship to veterans law and veterans benefits, tax law, you name it. We have a lot of different opportunities. And the 3 field placements are also done for credit through the school, but they're done outside the school grounds at the state attorney's office or the public defender's office. So it's a great way to get that practical legal experience under your belt for credit. We also have a pro bono requirement. To graduate, you have to complete a minimum of 40 hours of pro bono work. Semester in practice program is another fantastic opportunity that a lot of our third-year students take advantage of. A semester in practice program is when you go and you get an internship in another city. It doesn't have to be Gainesville. It can be anywhere, Miami, Orlando, New York, California, who knows? And you practice there for a semester and finish up your law school credits with that internship experience. And then the final type of experiential learning opportunity is a simulation course. A simulation course is where courses where students can take on a fake legal matter, unlike clinics, which are real legal cases. Simulation courses are fake matters, but they're meant to help you obtain skills in things like negotiation and drafting. We do offer a number of combination degrees at UF Law. Again, we are part of a larger university that's very strong. And so with that, we do offer these opportunities in different master's programs to do joint degrees. I think usually what happens with combination degrees is that students don't apply for them until they're already in law school, and then they start sprinkling in joint degree classes in their second and third years of law school. We have a fantastic and vast alumni network. We have over 116 years of tradition here at the University of Florida of leadership. Our Gator Nation has dominated the Florida Bar, which is the nation's second largest, and we've produced more than half of the presidents of the Florida Bar Association in its history. So definitely a history of leadership here, but we've also produced 5 presidents of the American Bar Association since 1973, which is more than any other law school during the same period. We have over 22,000 living alums. They are in 50 states and 60 countries. And interestingly, to some applicants and some prospective students, 69% of our students or our alums are in Florida, but the other 31% are out of state or out of the US. So basically 2/3 in state, 1/3 out of state. And the top markets where our alums are practicing are Atlanta, number 1, DC, number 2, and New York, number 3. So we definitely have a presence in many of the major legal markets across this country that you might be interested in practicing in, even if your goals take you outside of Florida. We have really strong student support and wellness at UF Law, and we've made this a real priority. We have a low student to faculty ratio, 4.8 to 1. We have less than 70 students in each 1L section. So in your 1L year, you're divided up into 3 sections. And so this year, it's about 70 students in each one of those 3 sections. And you go along to all of your classes with those same 70 students. So 88% of your upper level classes have less than 25 students in them. So in your 2L and 3L year, most of your classes are going to be very small, less than 25 students. We have over 250 faculty members. We have a full-time mental health counselor that's dedicated to the law school, present at the law school. So this is an enormous resource for our law students and really shows that UF prioritizes its students' mental health. Because law students do oftentimes have unique mental health concerns versus those in undergrad, because there's a lot of stress in law school. So the Office of Career and Professional Development is also here to help you throughout your time to get jobs and internships, externships, et cetera. And then we also, as a law student, you can take advantage of the extensive university resources available to you, like UF Rec Sports, UF Mindfulness, the Disability Resource Center, UF Counseling and Wellness Center, et cetera, et cetera. As you can imagine at UF, we do have a vibrant student life. Here are some students in the swamp at one of our football games. And we have over 20 student organizations specific to the law school. We have 5 different journals that you can participate in as a law student: the Florida Law Review, Entertainment and Sports Law Review, Journal of International Law, the Journal of Law and Public Policy, and the Journal of Technology Law and Policy. So those are very popular with our students. We have 6 competitive advocacy teams ranging from different types of moot court, the mediation team, like the alternative dispute resolution team, and then the trial team, who we fondly call the litigators. We have 5 different centers at UF Law, and I know sometimes a center may be confusing as to what exactly is, but basically it's just a program at the forefront of scholarship and advocacy on a pressing legal issue. It's not necessarily an area of study. It's not necessarily something that you do at law school, but students who come to the law school know that they can work with faculty, take classes, and engage in events related to the topics that the centers address. The location on the main university campus is also a benefit to our students in providing them a vibrant student life. We have over 20,000 graduate students at UF. And I think that comes as a surprise because so many people, especially as undergraduate students, you think of other undergraduate students at our school, at our university. But we have over 20,000 graduate level and above students. So graduate students, PhDs, law students, business students, med students, you name it. So it really does have a robust population beyond the undergraduate population as well. And you can join organizations on the main campus with them. So of course, as many of you are familiar with, Florida is a fantastic location to go to school. Many of you know and love Florida maybe as your home state, while others of you may just picture sunny beaches and warm weather from your experience, but what you may not know is that Florida is a fantastic place to start your legal career. As I mentioned before, UF is the flagship law school in our state. We're the #1 ranked law school in the state of Florida, which is a state seeing unprecedented growth. People from all over the country are flocking to Florida, and we're one of the fastest growing states in the nation. And with this migration has come people and businesses with legal needs. So we have a really high demand for lawyers in this state. And so that makes it a great place. And not only do we don't just have one legal market that's strong, there are multiple legal markets in this state that are a great place to start your career. For instance, Orlando, Jacksonville, and Tampa, Tallahassee, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, you name it. All of them have lots of lawyers and lots of legal opportunities. So for the next part of the presentation, financing your legal education. So how many of you, just show me in the chat, like how many of you would rather ignore this topic to some degree? Yeah, just say me. I know. It is tough, right? And it's a topic that's not necessarily a fun one. But I think that if you understand some of the basic terminology surrounding how law schools talk about their expenses and things like that, it will help demystify a lot of this and sort of help you feel more confident as you look into law schools and start thinking about law schools that you might want to apply to. So, cost of attendance. Okay, don't be afraid of the gator. When the cost of attendance, although most of you are Floridians, so I don't think you would be anyway. So what's the cost of attendance? Cost of attendance is a term that gets thrown around a lot. And with law schools, and people misconstrue this as tuition. Sometimes people think of it as the living expenses, but honestly, cost of attendance is everything. It's the estimated costs, both direct and indirect, associated with attending a particular law school in an academic year. Fall and spring semesters is what that means, not summer, including tuition and fees, books and supplies, housing, food, transportation, personal expenses, and we include a category computer/cell phone. Now, basically all you need to know is that it's tuition plus all the other expenses that a school estimates you'd have to pay to go to school. Now, a direct cost is something that you pay to the university. So the only thing out of this list that you pay to the university is tuition and fees. Everything else is something that you're going to pay to a third party, right? You're going to pay the gas at the gas station. You're going to pay for food at the grocery store. You're going to pay for housing at an apartment. Now, to be fair, if you have on-campus housing, maybe you do pay that to the school, but that's a separate story. Most of the time, law students live off campus, so I'm assuming that your housing is paid to a landlord. So it's kind of different. So direct versus indirect is something to think about too. But it's all part of a bigger term, cost of attendance. And when you look at most schools' cost of attendance, it's done in a 9-month block. So that's fall and spring semesters. They don't include summer. A summer cost of attendance would be something separate that you'd have to pay separately. A lot of law students don't take classes in the summers. So that's not necessarily part of the number that you're going to see at the law schools you'd be considering. So this is UF Law's cost of attendance this year. And I'm using this as an example only just so you can see how the breakdown would be at different schools. Now, different schools may use different categories, right? They may not have a computer or cell phone category. Maybe they break it down slightly differently. But generally speaking, the different categories should address generally the different costs that you would have to attend the school. Some people break tuition separately from fees. It It just depends on the school. But I'm using ours as an example because that's the one that I'm familiar with, and that's the one that I have at my disposal easily. So as you'll notice, I mean, UF as a state school, a lot of schools are private schools. They would only have one cost of attendance, right? Because they don't have a different cost of attendance for residents versus non-residents. They'd only have one. Just this is our cost of attendance. We have two separate cost of attendance because we have a resident cost of attendance and a non-resident cost of attendance. The only difference between the two is the tuition and fees, because we have an in-state resident tuition and fee. Well, it's really the resident, it's the tuition rate. It's not the fees rate that's different. It's the tuition rate that's different between residents and non-residents. Okay, so if you look at this, oh, and the other thing is that if you're a veteran, you may be eligible for in-state tuition. I know in Florida, but even in other states that you may apply to schools at. So if you are a veteran, that's something to consider too. We often get asked if you can become a resident after your first year of law school. Because a lot of people assume like, oh, if I've been at school a year in a place and I'm not from the state, then maybe I can start being a resident after a year. At UF Law, it is a little bit challenging to become a resident after a year. So I would check in with the schools that you're applying to or that you consider to talk about residency, especially if you're from another state. If say you're from Florida and applying to a school in another state, like they may have a similar thing where it's a little bit challenging or it takes over a year to get to be a resident or whatnot. So check in with the schools to see what their residency policies are if they're state schools. Again, if they're private schools, that's not of any consequence because they just have one cost of attendance, resident or not. But state schools have resident versus non-resident, and you might want to inquire. Okay, so this is a little bit about our cost of attendance, but it's about just giving you a feel for like what the cost of attendance might be at various law schools. So I'd prepared this chart to compare UF Law to other top 30 law schools in the country, right? So some of the top schools in the country, this is how our cost of attendance would compare. So of course, as a Florida resident, like we're very low. We actually have the second lowest tuition rate of any state school in the country at UF. So we're very lucky as Floridians to have that at our disposal. But if you see non-residents a little higher, but I think that the last four bars here are kind of important for you to take note of because you'll see how high the cost of attendance can go. And not only do private schools obviously have higher cost of attendances than state schools, but you'll see that, even when you get up to the highest private school in the top 30, their cost of tuition can be all the way up at $120,000 almost, okay, per year. So that's a lot. And it's a lot more than you would pay at a state school in Florida or even a state school in another state, even as a non-resident. So something to consider when you're thinking about the debt that you might be taking on, that the cost of attendance can vary really widely between different schools. So please do keep that value proposition in your mind as you're thinking about the schools to apply to, because if you're already thinking about schools that have a really strong value and a lower cost of attendance, then all of the financing, your legal education stuff is still important, but it becomes way lower of a burden on you than a higher cost institution. Now, schools that are in big cities are generally going to have high costs of attendance. Can anybody tell me why in the chat? Why would a school in a big city have a really high cost of attendance? Let's see. Yes, rent, cost of living. Thanks, Isabella. Thanks, Michael. That's right. So in a big city, your rent, your cost of attendance is going to be very different because not so much the tuition and fees, which also may be higher because a lot of times the schools in big cities are private schools and they're going to have higher tuition and fees. But it's also the living expense part of it that's so expensive because to live in a big city for 3 years is going to cost you a lot. So a school like UF in Gainesville has a way lower cost of attendance, not only because it's a state school with a low tuition rate, it has a low cost of living. So just something to think about when you're thinking about these schools, because where you're starting off is going to be a much different position at certain schools than other schools. And you can always live in big cities after you graduate, right? And you have a paycheck coming in. This is how, and this is just kind of the similar idea, but in a different form of a chart. This is a lot of schools that people who apply to UF compare us to, right? They overlap in applications at these schools. And you'll see how low and how different the cost of attendance can be at UF versus other institutions. And remember, the schools that have bars where the white and orange are totally equal, that means that the in-state, like the white is the state resident tuition and the orange is the out-of-state resident tuition. But at private schools, those bars are going to be equal because in-state and out-of-state doesn't make any difference. It's the same. So similar idea, you can see how different the cost of attendance would be. So if you're starting out already, all of this loan stuff is going to be a lot less scary than if you are taking out all of those in loans at some of those higher cost schools. Okay, so this is a comparison here, like again, cost of attendance difference versus the average top 30 private school. So at the average top 30 private law school, you're looking at a cost of attendance, say like $107,000. So each year, and this is per year, right? So our per year cost of attendance for state residents is $48,164. Our non-resident is $64,400. And the average top 30 private law school, their cost of attendance is $107. So when you look at the difference there, you would be paying almost $65,000 a year more to attend, if you're a Florida State resident, some average top 30 private school. And even if you're a non-Florida resident to attend UF, you'd be paying almost $50,000 less a year. So that's a lot of money, and that really adds up. If you think of what all of these things, when you think about the loans, right? If this is over 3 years, like say you had to take out the entirety of that $48,000 in loans to go to law school. Say you had to take out the whole $64,400 in loans. Say you had to take out the whole $107,761 in loans. That second line is the debt that you would end up with at the end of law school, because interest accrues on your loans while you're in school as a law student. So it's not just the base amount, it's that with the interest, okay? So when you look at the total debt differential that it would cost to go to an in-state school like UF versus the average top 30 law school, you're going to end up with $222,000 more loans at that school than you would if you had attended UF. And so again, this is not just a UF-centric thing, but I'm using our numbers because I'm familiar with them. Think about the value and the cost of attendance at these schools, because this is real money. I know it feels like funny money when you're taking out loans, and we'll get to the different types of loans in a moment. But like, it feels like funny money when you're talking about loans, like, oh, I can just take out more loans from the government, no problem. Like, they'll give it to me, and they do. But do you really want over $200,000 on your debt load for the rest of your life that you didn't have to take? Or even if you're a non-resident, 167,000. I mean, it's less, but it's still not great. So when you think about what those loans are going to be per month that you're going to have to pay for, right? So $148,000 of loans, let's say you end law school with that. That means that you would have a $1,700 a month loan payment. That's what that comes to. That's a really hefty payment, right? In addition to you having to pay your rent and your car payment and your insurance and like all this other stuff that you've got to pay out of your paycheck. Even though you're getting a paycheck after law school, hopefully you've got a job. $1,700 a month is nothing. It's not small, but look at what it would be if you went to the average top 30 private law school. If you use a standard repayment plan, you would be paying $4,200 a month just toward your law school loan payment. That's not a fun amount. to do, to have to deal with. So if you want to play around with different schools and different numbers, I would encourage you to go to AccessLex website, accesslex.org. It's a nonprofit organization that helps students who are applying to law school, in law school, and after law school with financial literacy. You can plug in different schools and figure out what your monthly loan payment would be at the end if you had to take it all out in loans. So that's where I got this information. It's fun in a weird way, at least for people like me, but it is fun in a weird way, but it's also insightful for you to see what your life would be like after law school, paying these loans potentially at these schools. Let's see. We've already kind of gone over that. Yep. So this is my $200,000 slide. What is $200,000 equal, right? We're saying that there's a difference in loans of $200,000, and this is kind of just funny, but like $200,000 is a 2024 Bentley SUV. $200,000 is a 20% down payment on a $1 million two-bedroom condo in downtown Miami. It's 2 4-year undergraduate educations for your future children at University of Florida undergrad. And it's also, you could go on 10-night luxury African safaris, 5 if you want to take someone with you, 5 safaris. So it's 3 3/4 years worth of $4,500 per month rent on a 1-bedroom apartment in New York City. So I know this is kind of funny, like you wouldn't go just blow your extra, the $200,000 that you didn't spend on law school on something else. And it's not like it's money in your pocket, but I do think it's helpful to visualize, that these are major things in your life that you may have to delay doing if you had that much more debt on your plate. So as far as financial planning for law school, I think the first thing that you have to do is just be reasonable about, do you really feel that the difference in cost to you and the things that you're going to forego in your life, potentially, at least when you're starting out, but maybe for quite some time, are going to be worth the difference in cost. Paying less to obtain your JD degree will give you more freedom. You're going to start putting money towards the things that you might want in life far sooner. And, that's even without scholarship funding. Some schools do give your scholarship funding, so that muddies the waters a bit. But presuming all loans, that is a pretty convincing reason, that freedom aspect is a pretty convincing reason to consider a school that's a lower cost to start with, before we even talk about any of the specific loan stuff. Okay, so speaking of specific loan stuff, here we are. Ways to finance law school. Now, this is kind of getting down into the more nitty-gritty stuff. The primary way that law students finance law school is via loans, and primarily federal loans. And so of the federal loans, those are things that you get from the federal government after filling out your FAFSA. There are 2 types of loans that you could get from the federal government as a law student: the direct unsubsidized loan and the Graduate Plus loans. The direct unsub loan is the more favorable of the 2 loans, and that's because it has a lower interest rate and it has a lower origination fee attached to it. And it does not require a credit check like the Grad Plus loan does. So, however, the direct unsubsidized loan, there's a little bit of a catch. There is a cap to it. You can only take out $20,500 per academic year of this type of loan. So if you're going to a school where you have to take out more than $20,500 worth of loans to afford it, you're going to have to move on to Grad Plus. The direct unsubsidized loan has an 8.08% interest rate every year, and that's just currently. Every year, the direct unsub loan there's a new interest rate announced on July 1st of every year. So I couldn't tell you what next year's interest rate is going to be yet, or if it's going to raise or lower. I can't tell you. Interest does accrue while you're in school on the unsubsidized loan. That's why it's called unsubsidized, because the government does not subsidize the interest on it while you're in school. It has a 1.057% origination fee. So basically, the government takes out a little bit of money out of your loan to originate, to start the loan. So for instance, if you borrowed 20,500 of this loan, which is the cap, you would only really get in your pocket, or the school would only get $20,283. So that's a little bit of a catch there. Now, the Grad Plus has a higher interest rate, as I mentioned, 9.08%. The new rate will become available on July 1st. Interest accrues while you're in law school on that loan too. And it has a higher origination fee. It has a 4.228% origination fee. So if you take out, say, $20,000 of that type of loan, you're going to end up with less going to the school or in your pocket. So 19,154 would be what you would get off of a $20,000 loan. So there is a credit check that's associated with Grad Plus. It's not a strenuous credit check like, oh, you have a 720 versus a 750 credit score, so you're not eligible. It is more, or you don't have any credit, so you're not eligible. It's more like if you have any serious adverse credit, like bankruptcies or defaults on federal student loans or something like that. So those things are what they look for. So I wouldn't worry too much unless you have some serious adverse credit history. And even then, the government likes to give you the opportunity to cure those or maybe have a cosigner on your loan. So then that way you can still be eligible for the loan. So I wouldn't worry too much about ineligibility. I've seen a few students not be eligible, but it's pretty rare. The cap on Grad Plus is not something set like 20,500. The cap on your Grad Plus loan is basically the full cost of attendance. And we'll go over that in just a few minutes when I show you some sample aid packages and how they might be calculated. So let's see. Private loans are the next type. I think I've covered everything on those. Unless you guys have questions at the end, I'm happy to answer. But private loans are the next type of loans that you might be able to get. We generally advise students not to take private loans if they're eligible for federal loans, because usually the private loans have a higher interest rate and/or they may have less favorable options for repayment plans. So the federal loans have very flexible repayment plans that are geared towards students who are starting out in their profession. Whereas private loans are from banks and they're just going to be like, this is the repayment, that's it. Right? So it may be a little bit less flexible. And the other thing that students get confused about is whether they can take out private loans on top of federal loans to get more money, to live a nicer lifestyle during school. And the answer is no. And so basically your loans, all of your aid is capped at the cost of attendance. So like, let's say at UF, that's about $48,000 for residents. Like you couldn't then take out $48,000 of federal loans and then go to the bank and say, I need 10 more thousand for a nicer apartment. Like that's not really how it works, right? So you would be capped. If you took out private loans, it would actually displace some of your federal loans off of your package. Okay, scholarships. Scholarships are the next way to finance law school. And not everyone gets a scholarship at every school. Whoops. Not everyone gets a scholarship at every school, so just keep that in mind. But they are, you may want to apply to schools where you think that you might be more likely to get scholarships. So then that way you can take out less loans. We always encourage students to apply to a range of schools. Schools where you feel like you are, likely to get in and may get a scholarship. Versus reach schools as well, where if you are a reach to even get in the school, then you might not get a scholarship because you wouldn't be a scholarship candidate at that particular type of school. Scholarships are usually given by the school. And they're given during the admissions process. Every school has a different process for that, whether you have to fill out different forms, whether you have to submit like a different application, separate application. Sometimes you get the offer at the same time as your admission offer. Sometimes you get scholarship offers separate from your admissions offer. So it's a vast range of processes. I would encourage you to contact the schools that you're interested in or going to apply to find out what their scholarship policies and procedures are. Or like they may have webinars or different things that explain it as well, or a website that explains it. So definitely do your research. Every school has a slightly different thing that they like to do with their scholarships. Continuing student scholarships, so that's the incoming type of scholarship is during the admissions process. Continuing student scholarships may be opportunities for you to earn scholarship once you're at the law school. So sometimes students do really, really well their first year and didn't come in with a lot of scholarship funding, but they proved the system wrong and they did really well and they end up top of their class. And so some schools offer continuing student scholarships to those students if they do really well, perform a certain level in their class or something like that. Continuing student scholarships can also be for performance in various courses while you're in law school. Sometimes if you do really, really well at, say, a trial advocacy course, they may have scholarship, like a scholarship award if you performed very, very well in that course. So it just depends. Again, this is not a thing that you should ask the different schools that you're thinking of applying to or that you do apply to see if there's opportunities to earn scholarship once you get there, if you don't come in with scholarship or if you come in with a low scholarship. External scholarships are another opportunity for funding, and I would really recommend that everyone look into the AccessLex Scholarship Databank, accesslex.org/databank. It's a fantastic resource for external scholarships. So if you haven't visited it, I would. There's about 700 or 800 different scholarships listed on that website that have been vetted by AccessLex. Again, I'm bringing up AccessLex again. It's that nonprofit organization that helps law students learn more about financing law school. And the external scholarships you can categorize them. They're by different geographic area, different demographic traits, you name it. But there's a lot of different opportunities. You can filter it by different things and get lots of opportunities. Most law students and most incoming law students are busy and they don't apply to these. They do not take advantage of the opportunity to apply for external scholarships. And external scholarships are not going to be full tuition scholarships. They're probably $1,000, $2,500, something like that. But that still adds up. Let's say you get a few of those. That adds up to something that's, especially at a school like UF with a low, tuition rate, that adds up really quickly. And maybe you do get to cover, a significant portion of your tuition with external scholarships. So don't be lazy, do apply for them. You can apply external scholarships usually to any school that you want to go to. So this is not something that's exclusive, like, okay, I can only apply to this unless it says specifically in the description for the external scholarship, you have to attend school in a certain state, or you have to reside in a certain state or county or something like that. Unless it says that explicitly, you can apply the external scholarships to whatever law school that you end up going to. So it's worthwhile during the application process to apply to those external scholarships. And I know that at University of Florida specifically, if you have leftover Bright Futures, if you have 15 or more credits remaining on your Bright Futures, you can utilize that in your first semester only of law school to help you pay for your first semester. So if you do have Florida Bright Futures, inquire with the law school. Of course, you can only use that at Florida schools and qualifying Florida schools, but that's something to think about if you guys are Floridians and you are, looking to go to law school in Florida. Some schools have grants. Some schools have need-based grants. They make you fill out a need-based application, or they require you to submit a FAFSA in order to be eligible for need-based grants. That's an option. Some schools only have merit-based scholarships. Some people have need-based grants. So something to inquire about as well. Working is another way to defray your costs during law school. And most law schools are full-time programs. Most law schools do not want you to work during your first year of law school to help defray your costs, or they strongly recommend that you don't. But in your second and third years of law school, you can. And usually the general guideline for a full-time program is that most schools don't like you to work full-time jobs. They prefer, if you're in a full-time law school program, they'd prefer you maybe keep it to 20 hours a week or less during law school if you want to work in your second or third years. But again, check with the law schools that you're considering or that you're applying to and ask if they have any restrictions on work. and ask them if it's possible or that if students do work in their second and third years of law school. Usually by that time, you can find work as an illegal intern that might be paid. And so your pay rate may be more than working at the local coffee shop or at the library or whatever. So it can be more helpful than just like $10 an hour. You may get paid a little bit more since you are a law student doing actual somewhat legal work, even if you're not a full-fledged lawyer yet. Okay. Federal loans process. So this is a very general timeline. And do you know why it's a circle? Does anyone know why this is a circle, this process? I know it doesn't really look like a circle. It looks more like a rectangle, but it's meant to be a circle, but PowerPoint's a rectangle. Let's see. Any clue? Okay, well, I'll tell you. The reason why is because you have to do this process every year that you're in school. So you can't just fill out the FAFSA. Yep. Someone says it has to be. Yep, that's right. It has to be. Oh, that was you. That was you, Muncie. It does have to be repeated every year that you're in school. So this doesn't go away. You're going to have to do it 3 times if you go to law school. Generally speaking, the FAFSA becomes available on October 1st. It's available at studentaid.gov. It's not binding in any way. You can send it to multiple schools. So just because you send a school your FAFSA information doesn't mean you're going there. The other schools don't know what other schools you sent it to. So I would go ahead and send it at least to the top 10 schools that you're considering. So then that way they just have the information. October 1st through the springtime, your FAFSA information will be sent to the university of your choice. And then it just sits there basically until you're admitted. They're not going to do anything with it until you're admitted at most schools. And then spring through early summer, university takes action on your FAFSA and packages you. So different schools have different timelines. Some schools start packaging in very early spring. Others, like UF, don't start packaging until the summertime. So it's a wide range there when a school might take action on your FAFSA and notify you of your financial aid package. Remember, FAFSA is for loans. This is the FAFSA loans process. Like this is FAFSA and the federal loans process. This is not necessarily scholarship. Scholarship from institutions is not via, it doesn't, it's not the same timeline. So just as a, just as a little reminder there. But, and then when you get your package in spring, early summer, you can view and evaluate your package. You don't have to borrow all that you're offered. I think that's a mistake that a lot of students make, is that they think that they have to borrow everything that's in their package because they think that that was tailor-made for them. And it was sort of tailor-made for them, but it's based on the cost of attendance figures and those different line items that we discussed at the first. You may not need as much money for transportation, right? Maybe you live within walking distance. You don't have to pay for a parking pass. Maybe you don't have to pay for gas as much because you're not driving every day to and from school. Like, maybe those things play a role. Maybe you cook every day at home. You're a great cook. You know how to, watch your dollars at the grocery store. You know what you're getting, and you cook for yourself all the time. You never go out to eat dinner. Maybe your cost for food that was delineated in the average expected costs and the cost of attendance, maybe you don't spend as much. So, you can borrow less than you're offered, and that's why I would encourage you to do a budget before you start law school to figure out how much you actually really think you need. I know that can be hard to do. Making a budget is hard to do. Access Lex does have webinars, by the way, on their website about how to create a budget if you're interested. But that is something that I do recommend you do before deciding just to blanket take out all the loans that you're offered, because that can help you reduce your debt. Basically, you go through the rest of the process throughout the summer. You finalize your loans by early to midsummer, basically, and then in early August, that's when you usually receive your tuition bill from schools. If you've borrowed loans, you don't have to pay the tuition bill that you get. Basically, if you've finished the loan process, the school recognizes that, and you won't have to pay the bill if you've already started the loan process, and they see that. The loans will come in from the federal government and pay to the school. Okay, so this is where it gets tricky. So remember we talked about direct and indirect costs of cost of attendance before. The direct cost is the stuff that you pay to the school. The indirect is the stuff that you pay to third parties. And you could take out loans for all of those things. And so when the federal government sends the loan money over to your school, they pay half in the spring, half in the fall, half in the spring. They divide it up like that. But like you took out expenses for things that the university is not owed for, right? So you paid out more, or you got paid from the federal government in loans more than what the university needs to pay your bill. So what happens is you get your loan money paid from the university, then they pay you what they call a loan refund. They pay you the extra and back to you. So then that way, and they direct deposit that into your account if you sign up for it. And then that way you can pay your rent, your books, whatever. One key point is that these loans aren't refunded to you. That loan funding is not refunded to you until school begins, usually. So when you're setting up your apartment or paying deposits on your apartment or things like that, you're going to have to come up with that funding on your own because your loans won't have come through yet. And that is a difficult thing for law students. So as far as financial planning, that is something that you're going to need to plan for. A lot of people don't realize that their loans don't come through immediately once you decide to accept them. That's not the way it works. The federal government does not pay out until you start classes. So budget for those setup expenses accordingly. So I'm going to kind of speed through this because we're running out of time, but this is a sample aid package here that you might, just so you can see how an aid package is calculated. So this is using University of Florida's numbers because we have to use somebody's numbers, and those are the most familiar numbers here. But so the cost of attendance is, for a resident, this is a Florida residence package. The cost of attendance, remember, direct and indirect together, are $48,164. So think of it as like a glass of water that's $48,000 call when it's full. You've got to pay that, or you've got to think about how to fill up that glass. So this person didn't get any scholarship, so that's not helping to fill the glass. They did get an external scholarship though, so that pays $2,500 into the glass. Then they're going to have to take out loans to fill up the rest of the glass. And so $20,500, remember, because we start with direct on sub because it's the more favorable of the two types of federal loans. That goes up to $20,500. And then to fill up the rest of the glass, you'd need $25,164 of Grad Plus loans. So that's kind of how that works. You can't take out more loans in the glass. It would spill. We don't want that. This is the maximum you could take out. That would be what you were offered. Okay. Here's another one. This is somebody who got a full tuition scholarship, for example, $21,804. So here's the glass. You fill it up $21,804 with a scholarship, $20,500 with the first type of loan, direct on sub. And then the rest, which is not very much, you only have to take out $5,860 of Grad Plus to fill up the glass. Okay. I know that's kind of complicated. And again, this is assuming that you don't have any other type of aid, they didn't have any other grants, no other external scholarships. I mean, again, this is simplified, but that's kind of how packaging works. So I want to plug Access Lux again. It's a fantastic organization. It offers pre-law personal finance modules and webinars that are free for you. They go on a range of financial aid topics. They're really great. They also have one-on-one financial counseling with an accredited financial counselor available to you. And that's for any pre-law student, doesn't matter what law school you're going to, they want to help you figure it out. They can talk to you about things like repayment plans and, budgeting and all sorts of different stuff. So utilize the resource, it's there for you. So some of the key takeaways, of course, UF Law has a great cost of attendance. It starts out very low. So some of these things that you're thinking about taking out a bunch of debt, they do apply to UF Law, but not to the same degree that they would at some other top 30 law schools, particularly private schools. Federal loans are the primary method of financing your legal education. If you're going to be borrowing those loans, start with direct unsubsidized, then you'd go on to Grad Plus if you're borrowing loans. you're going to probably complete the loan process by midsummer at most of the institutions that you'd be going to. And my final adage here is if you live like a lawyer when you're in law school, you'll live like a law student while you're a lawyer. So keep your costs down, live frugally while you're in law school, minimize that debt, make a budget, make sure you're not borrowing more loans than you need so you don't have more burden when you graduate. So keep it frugal, keep it tight, and then whenever you graduate, that's great. Then you have a paycheck, and then you can maybe be a little bit more free with what you do. But you're still a student. Just keep that in mind. And time for Q&A. So does anyone have any questions? I know it's a lot of information. It's a lot of dense information. Okay. Let's see. I'm receiving federal loans for my bachelor's here at UCF. How can I transfer to law school without having to pay for the loans yet so I can start law school? Well, I think that there's a grace period, and you can, it's like you go into forbearance on your loans. So you basically need to notify your lender that you're going to be a student still, and then you don't have to start paying your loans off from undergrad yet. Cool. Any other questions? No? Okay, any questions from anybody, any of the administrators on the how long does it take to repay loans? Well, it depends on how much you take out. And it depends on what payment plan that you take. So for instance, there's a program called Public Service Loan Forgiveness. And if you work continuously for 10 years and make 10 years worth of loan payments consecutively on your loans, and you're employed in a qualifying public interest employment position that entire time while you're making those payments, then your loans are forgiven after those 10 years. So that can be one way. That's kind of a definite 10 years, but other people do different repayment plans that may stretch out the repayment. But keep in mind, as you're repaying your loans, interest is still accruing on your loans. So the balance is not always getting smaller depending on how much you're paying off on it. So it could really stretch for quite a while into the future, which is again why you need to be really conscious about taking the loans out in the first place and what type of school that you're going to and sort of the cost of attendance to begin with. Because then you don't have to worry necessarily about having those loans stretch, decades into the future. Okay, let's see. What are some of the types of scholarships that UF offers for law school, or is it only outside? UF Law offers institutional inside scholarships during the admissions process. And usually, those are merit-based scholarships, although they are a holistic review. So merit can be a lot of different things. It's not just your numbers always. So yeah, that there's really only one type. I mean, there's different names for the different amounts of scholarships, but there's really only one consideration process, and all scholarships are kind of considered under that same purview, if that makes sense. What percentage of UF Law students receive financial aid? So that's the other thing that's interesting to talk about, because financial aid, it's funny. Scholarships are kind of scholarships, and financial aid to me means loan, or like loans, federal loans or private loans or something else, right? So when I think about scholarships, it's scholarships. Scholarships at UF Law, we do, I think, almost 85 or 90% receive some amount of scholarship. Now that could be small, right? That could be $5,000. But it could be all the way up to full tuition. So that's something to think about. And when I think of financial aid and loans, how many people take out loans? Less than half of our students have to take out loans. And I think that's because we're generous with scholarships and our cost of attendance is already quite low. So at UF Law, a lot of these considerations about different types of loans and stuff, they really aren't even a factor for the majority of our students, which is it's something great to say because I don't think most law schools could say the same. Um,
Thank you so much, Leslie. I wanted to ask really quick if you don't mind, would you be able to put in your email in the chat so that students, if they have any other questions after this, oh, perfect. You even have that, yeah.
Here's our phone and email for our admissions office, and they'll give it to me. This is our contact information. We'd be happy to have you contact us with any questions or concerns. Or if you're just interested in UF Law, always happy to, share information with you about how to connect with us, like come on a tour, come on a visit, class visit, anything like that, we'd be happy to do.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Of course, of
I
course.
left the AAP email in the chat if anyone else has any questions for AAP. We also put in a little post presentation survey if you guys don't mind filling that out. This was such a great presentation with a lot of really good information. Seeing everything played out was really, yeah, it's really helpful. And thank you so much for all of that, Leslie.
Of course. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.